Apologies for the problems we had with audio in that interview, but we're going to discuss that now with our panel. Hive News publisher Bernard Hickey, National Party insider Michelle Bogue, and First Union President Robert Reid. Welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us. Bernard, I'm going to start with you. John Key said you can't ban foreign purchases, ban's ineffective. He has the tools to address foreign purchasing, and he mentioned land tax.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most strong comment we've had from the Prime Minister about some sort of stamp duty or some sort of tax on non-resident buying, like we see in Singapore and Hong Kong. The one in Singapore was quite effective at slowing down house price inflation. He was much more direct about saying that a TPP and actually also the Korean Free Trade Agreement would actually stop New Zealand from banning foreign buying in its current form, and that will be an interesting point of debate as we get into the last few stages of the TPP.
It indicates a willingness to look at the demand side for the first time on the housing question. Yeah,
and to raise the idea of a stamp duty, which has been bubbling away for the last few weeks. I wrote about it in a column a couple of weeks ago, and certainly it's a tool that the Treasury has said we could use within our current free trade agreements.
Michelle, he said in a speech she's about to give in an hour or so, New Zealand is thriving and doing well. Are we seeing two different framed arguments? Is that the problem here? You've been at the National Party conference this weekend. You said it's all running very tidily, I think was your expression. Is the National Party version of what the state of the economy the same as the rest of the country, or are we simply seeing two polemics?
No, I don't think there's two polemics at all. I think, you know, arguably, some people see it at slightly different emphasis, but we know that the dairy payout is down. We know also, however, that the exchange rate has dropped, which helps some in the economy. So there is a balance. I think what you'll see from John Key today is stressing the overall strategy. That's what the National Party audience want to hear. They want to hear that the government's in charge, it's a coherent strategy. And of course, what's interesting is the recent polls have really not shifted the political landscape at all. I think on this issue of foreigners buying land, the fact that the Prime Minister was overseas gave that about a week's more debate than it would have had, I think, if he was here.
He would have shut that down. Are you happy with how the National Party performed in his absence?
Well, I think if he'd been here, there would have been a quicker response, and what we're seeing now, and I'm not at all surprised, is that he gets back and says, because his antennae are very good, he says, OK, we have to do something about this issue, and he starts to talk about the tools, the sort of things that...
So I'll take that as a no, it wasn't very good in his absence, well, but he comes back, everything is solved again.
Well, I think it's about his instincts. He has this wonderful instinct to know what, you know, average Joe out there feels, and he would have come back into the country and thought, OK, this is the way I read this situation, I think we need to start figuring out what we're going to do about it.
Robert, your perspective on this? Because the other side of
the trouble is,
happy days of
New Zealand is not doing well. New Zealand is not doing great. I think John Key's New Zealand is basically Parnell.
That for me,
if he only sees what's happening in Parnell, perhaps he's right. But the rest of the country...
When you say New Zealand's not doing great, what are you talking about? The Auckland housing market and dairy?
And low wages and people not even being able to afford one house for one family, but having 3 or 4 families into a house.
This is the National Party that boosted the basic benefit.
The benefit can go up, but if house prices and other things are going even above that, then that's what causes housing affordability. So I think we actually have to look at what's really happening and not just talk about the PR of whether he spun it right or spun it wrong. We're at the end of a business cycle, and all economists would actually have that. Now, to reach the end of a business cycle with wages of most workers in this country still well behind even productivity increases, when are working people going to catch up?
Are you saying that we don't have the opportunity he stresses is still there for people of lower incomes?
No, there's not those opportunities, and he'll always, yes, you can always find one individual who's gone from the child of a widow in a state house and perhaps become a banker, but it's not about one individual. It's about where most people are, and at the moment we're finding that in fact workers don't even are knowing less every day how many hours they're going to have to work, what wage they're on. We've had this 0 hours thing come up in Parliament where the government promised it would do something about 0 hours. All it's done is actually legislate, basically, or is going to legislate to make it legal.
The issue here is that in Auckland in particular, the aspirational story where you can buy a house if you're on a reasonable job and you can have a family and the value of that house rises and that's how you have enough money for your retirement. That's probably true in most parts of the country, but in Auckland, where the real growth is, the points Corin made about how difficult it is for people to get their own home in Auckland, that resonates with a New Zealand who realise that the way to get ahead is, and to have a stable family, is to buy a house. But if you can't buy a house in Auckland, how can you have that life, that aspiration?
But some of this, Simon, is about expectations. A lot of young people I know, and they're peers of mine.
Oh, we're not doing older person
sons,
talking about the young people.
Well, you know, I'm afraid that's a fact. Their expectations are so high. You talk to younger people and they say, well, I can't afford the house I want, which happens to be a three-bedroom villa in Grey Lynn.
Do you think
and
it's
you
wrong
talk to them. No, I'm not saying that you shouldn't aspire to that, but as your first home, there's nothing wrong with investing in an apartment or going into an apartment or living in the suburbs. A lot of young people won't do that. They all want to live in the inner city.
So despite that, though, the facts
we're talking to narratives.
Yeah, absolutely. The facts show there is hang on a second, Robert. The facts show there is record low home ownership for the last 50 years at the moment. So the trend is quite clear. Are we in a new normal? Do we have to embrace new realities?
Well, don't forget that we've been talking for years about diversifying investment, and if everybody just regards owning their own home or owning several homes as the way that they're going to provide for themselves in their later age, and don't diversify into other things like the stock market and the opportunities that are out there.
This is the two realities that we live in. Working people don't even have enough money every week to be able to buy their food and their rent. They're not going to be talking about, how am I going to play the stock market? Where am I going to put my shares? This is the problem in this country. We've actually got the elite, represented by the government and Michelle, completely out of touch with where most working people are.
This is the problem that the left have in New Zealand.
I'm not talking about the left, I'm talking about working people.
They are talking about a very narrow narrative, and they're not acknowledging where most people sit and where most people sit.
Most people are working people.
If that was the case, the government wouldn't have...
Both sides, no matter what your political ideology, everybody wants to champion aspiration and opportunity. Is that
That's
fair?
right.
Is that fair?
And 47% of New Zealand think the government's doing the right job, and they were the same people that voted, 47% of them, in the last election. Now, in fact, this government has done an amazing job of bringing us through the GFC, of making sure the economy is stable. People want to live back here.
It hasn't.
It has, because those are the facts.
Let's
Rob.
pass over to an
Those
independent economist who can tell us that it hasn't.
The issue here, particularly in Auckland, and this was clear on Friday, is that we're not actually building enough houses to deal with the extra houses coming in. And a panel that's looking at supply and demand forecast for Auckland shows that we're only going to be building, on the current unitary plan rules, about 83,000 houses, and we need 400,000 houses by 2041.
And I put that squarely in the Auckland Council's hands, because even today I know through my work that there are plenty of projects that they could free up, that they're not doing so, and they're still making it difficult.
We can argue this until the cows come home, but this is a government in its third term. This is a critical stage for any government in its third term. Exactly. Will it have the hubris? Will it have the ability to still listen to